Welcome to this week's Fit for Purpose podcast. This week, I'm really delighted. We've got Sean Duffy. He's CEO of Wise Group, and I'm going to get him to tell you a little bit more about what the Wise Group does in a second. But I think, suffice to say, from my perspective, I often say that driving social mobility is literally one life at a time. And I think probably if there's any organisation that knows that from the inside out more than most, it's probably the Wise Group. Sean, I'm going to bring you in at this stage. Brilliant to have you on the podcast, and thanks so much for doing it. Tell us a little bit about what the Wise Group is all about, what you do, and then we'll sort of dig into that as we go along. But give people a little bit of a sense of what it's all about.
Okay, lovely to be here, Justine. The Wise Group's been around for over 40 years now. It was originally founded around about unemployment and substandard accommodation back in Glasgow in 1983. And the early team, then led by Alan Sinclair, was really focused on using people who were unemployed, giving them practical skills and retrofitting homes. And at that point, they had insulated over 250,000 homes, and the work grew out to land-wise and tree-wise, and then subsequently it came together into the Wise Group itself. And as time went on, the Wise Group founded the intermediate labour market model, which made it one of the largest social enterprises in the UK. It was adopted across Europe, and it really found itself influencing welfare approaches in the UK throughout the 90s and 2000s. But as unemployment fell, what the group did was it moved from giving practical experience to people through work to supporting people into work and building skills, and then really began to focus on social mobility. And today we find the group, it really benefits from its unique insight at a community level across the UK in terms of the barriers that people have to sustainable living and sustainable social mobility and progression. And where we find ourselves now is we've built up a real evidence base that allows us to take an evidence-based approach to changing lives throughout Scotland, England, and the wider UK.
And your work, I think that's a brilliant synopsis, by the way, of something that is complex. Your work really focuses, I think it's fair to say, in really 4 different areas. And I think, in a way, it starts with that housing, fuel poverty area, and then, as you say, widens out. So you've got work on employment, on skills, but also I think what's interesting, this targeting particularly as well on reoffending and helping people really transform their lives when perhaps they've served in custodial centres and then they're coming out and trying to get back on their feet. And I think for me, it's how you bundled all of that together that is really special, actually. But comes, as you say, with a lot of learnings, doesn't it, on how to genuinely transform some really challenged lives.
It does. I think one of the things that's apparent is that what you realise is that poverty is not a single issue area. It's a multifaceted area. So, and I think this leads you on to the discussion about policy making. And policy making tends to be around about single issue focuses. Where our teams find the most resonant support is you go into a house, you get into a household, you get into a household situation, and you realise that there are many different levers at play in that situational challenge that household is facing. So if when you look at rehabilitative work that we support across the UK, most often there are a number of requirements or needs below that offence, if you like, that's led to that incarceration. So most often it's not the criminality, it's the backstory that's led up to the criminality that we have to get under the skin of and understand. So it's the multifaceted nature of poverty and despair and desperation and social stagnation that we find our enterprise being most resonant in and understanding better.
And I think what was interesting to me, and I want to come on to that commission on breaking down barriers to employment opportunities that we kicked off with you, is the work of those relational mentors. that you do,
Yeah.
and if you like, how specialist in a way it ends up being, because these are people who have to build trust, and that takes time, but then use real judgment to almost understand where that person is in their journey, and then
Hmm.
what it's going to take. And as you say, these different facets of challenges that they'll face, and how to blend all of those issues together to genuinely get some progress. So give us a sense of maybe um, the kinds of people who work at Wise Group, and what they do, but also what drives them, their own lived experience often that they bring to
Uh-huh.
this.
Well, I mean, you mentioned relational mentoring, and relational mentoring is core across everything that we do. Um, and just to pause for a moment on that, because it's important that we understand that we had been responsive to many different, I suppose, partner requirements over many years to deliver
Hmm.
ubiquitous offerings. A single universal approach to what was a multifaceted issue. So relational mentoring is something we've designed over many years, which is really based around 15 identified needs. So
Hmm.
there are needs, for example, it could be energy support, digital skills, disability, work skills and experience. There's a number of things that play inside of a household that's contributing to their situation. And what we have is we have a cohort of colleagues that mirror, I suppose, the societal challenges that we're trying to support and alleviate. Um, they're compassionate, they're kind, they're highly professional, they're highly emotionally intelligent and empathetic to the situations that they find themselves in. And that mix of human and professional expertise and focus is proving really, really powerful. And what it does is it engenders both trust in the relationship, which is hugely important, and the relationship that they find themselves in with the households they're trying to support, but a real sense of understanding of the situation that they're trying to
Hmm.
affect. So they're not outside of that bubble. They're not trying to diagnose the situation without any experience of it. They're inside it, experiencing it, feeling it, and understanding it. And that really builds that trust and connection that allows them to be successful.
And the kinds of people who are doing this, give us a sense. I mean, if someone's listening to this podcast and thinks that sounds like a hugely important role to be able to play, uh, do you do training for people? What roles have they had perhaps before they come to working for Wise Group? I think from what you're saying, let's just be clear, a number of your employees will themselves have been in those situations, and that's why they can do such an empathetic, emotionally intelligent role. So if people are interested in shifting into this sort of role, what's your experience of almost what they'll need to do? What might be maybe past experience they might
Um,
need?
I think at risk of sounding glib here, one of the things that's hugely important is that anyone who joins the Wise Group, any individual that joins us, passionately shares the values we have, and
Hmm.
passionately shares the belief we have and the purpose that we
Mm.
set out to achieve every day. Our colleagues come from a whole range of backgrounds, from police, from the public sector, from banking, from
Hmm.
nursing, from academia. They are attracted to us because of what we do and the way we do it.
Hmm.
And I think that gives that there's a real powerful connection between the cohort of, we have almost 450 colleagues across the UK now, and there's a real bond between them. A normal example of measurement of cultural strength is when people do colleague surveys. As an example, our latest colleague survey on engagement gave us a 92% score across the
Wow.
UK, which is pretty remarkable. We never take it for granted because there's a huge amount of effort goes into that, and we have as a stated aim that our colleagues are always come first in everything that we do, and
Hmm.
we've managed to build that trust and belief in that over the years. So we enjoy a good reputation as a place to work, as a place to learn, um, and that's helped us attract people from all different backgrounds, all
Hmm.
different age groups, all different socio-economic groups, demographics, etc., which gives us a richness and a diversity, which allows us to mirror the richness and diversity of the society we're supporting. And I think that's a real strength for us.
And I guess it makes it a really interesting place to work and team to be part of, on top of the fact that the work you're doing is so hugely important, and it transforms lives, which is in itself massively satisfying.
It is, and as you can imagine, no 2 days, no 2 weeks, no 2 months are the same.
Mm. Mm.
And it's very much an equitable approach we take to what we do, and an equitable approach to who we attract. So it's, as I say, the richness is in that diversity. One of our values is we celebrate and respect individual difference, and that reflects the strength of our enterprise and the strength of our approach. Um, you know, and it was founded out of moving away from the ubiquitous offerings that were encouraged to provide in the past. So there is no surprise that we have that equitable approach and that diversity, and that relational mentoring, as an example, with its 15 identified needs, takes an individualistic approach to each circumstance that it encounters. So there's a real cohesion between who we are, what we do, and how we do it, and the people who do it for us.
Yeah, and I think when I met a number of those relational mentors last month, when we had a round table with all of them, I think what really struck me is, you know, it's just the level of insight in an practitioner
Yeah,
experience into working with people and getting lives on track and helping lives stay on track. And if you like, the complexity that is really hard to bolt down, but that sense of understanding what needs to happen in people's lives in order for them practically to move forward. And certainly from my experience as being an MP, dealing with some really difficult constituency issues, and people who are affected by them. I mean, often they'd be people I'd have known for years, building up those relationships in order to
yeah.
really be someone that they genuinely felt they could come to with some really tough challenges. But they were hugely impressive, and I'm going to guess, if it's anything like being an MP working locally, really intense roles, but
Yeah.
also some of the most satisfying work that you can think of doing. Is that, do you feel like that's how your employees see it? And do you need to support them when it can be quite an intense role that they've taken on?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a huge amount of emotional energy goes into the work that they do, a huge amount
Yep.
of it.
Related.
And as a result of that, their well-being is hugely important because, as a glib saying about you can't pour from an empty cup, they give so much to the circumstances and the people that they're supporting that we've put a huge amount of effort into taking care of them and taking care of their physical, mental, and financial well-being to make sure that they're at the best they can possibly be, because they do face some harrowing circumstances and some harrowing situations, because we tend to be working at the real hard edges of poverty.
Yeah.
Just not just on the line, but really
Yeah.
deep down.
Yeah.
And where it's endemic and generational,
Hmm.
and it takes a long, sustained interaction and journey, to help these households find a path to sustainability for them and their family members. And there are no one situation is the same. And it goes back to that single issue point, because previously you would come across households where there may be 4 or 5 or 6 different programs at play in one household, because they're all single issue focused, but they're not really having an impact. And what we're doing is we're bringing that all together with one person and one organisation approach for one household, with the multifaceted nature of support that's required.
Which makes so much more sense, because actually you have to do it through the lens of their lives, not almost from an institution that says, well, we've got these different programs, so that's what you
Yeah.
have to have. It has to be joined up, otherwise it just doesn't work. And I mean, obviously, we're really proud to be partnering with you on the Commission for Breaking Down Barriers to Employment Opportunities, because so much of this is about ultimately doing that initial work to help people get to the stage where then they can finally connect up to what are
Mhm.
some great opportunities out there, and almost a potential life ahead of them where they're resilient, and they can really finally start to make the most of their talents. I mean, obviously, it's a hugely complex piece of work that we're trying to look at through this commission. But from a Wise Group perspective, Sean, give us your sense of what you hope the commission can really achieve. And obviously, it's hugely important because it's a general election year. So if ever there was a time to be setting out some really positive, constructive solutions, it's probably this year, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's interesting. There's a lot of reflection on the impact the pandemic had on the country, and at one point, we're in an era of relatively low unemployment, relatively high skills attainment,
Hmm.
uh, and in work achievement was moving and trending in the right direction. Then the pandemic came along, and those who were nearing the front of the queue for support, those who were furthest from sustainability previously, were all of a sudden displaced because
Hmm.
the pandemic, had such an impact in the hospitality sector and other sectors, and it created instability. And then we had the economically inactive. All of these, all of these groups of people then came into play in terms of employment and skills again. And those who require that more sustained, intensive, emotionally intelligent, caring approach to get them back to a point of sustainability were displaced. Whether it be those who were experiencing homelessness, the care system, substance abuse, those who had disabilities, or community justice system, they need bespoke, holistic, equitable support.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they were displaced by lots of people who came onto the market because of the change that the pandemic had created. And what I would like us to see is to see us recognise that and not use pre-pandemic thinking for post-pandemic challenges.
Hmm.
And when you and I last met, we talked about notionally 80% of our population is costing us, sorry, 20% of our population is costing us 80% of our budget. That is never more true than now. And the more that we can target specific areas of need in an intensive and sustained way, that's where we'll get the exponential uplift in societal change and that social mobility, because those cohorts really need it. So that that move away from ubiquitous offerings, that universality of employability support or skill support, and it being more targeted and tailored, and
Hmm.
more recognizing of the multifaceted nature of the circumstances that these people feel or find themselves in, that's where we'll see the biggest impact.
I think that's right. And in it, it's those three words you said that I think you bring them together, and they are really powerful: bespoke, caring, intelligent approach.
Yeah,
And this sense that actually, if you can have that more tailored, smart approach, that, and it's relational mentoring and all of that, actually, for, if you like, a new cohort of people with less profound challenges, perhaps it's more of a timing issue. COVID meant that they were out of work, they need to retrain. You can take all of that deep insight for that core group, the Wise Group has always really targeted, and bring, if you like, a lighter touch version of that,
yeah,
for that much broader group. But in a sense, we do know what the solutions are. And I think what's interesting to me is, maybe I could be sat here today saying, oh, there's a plethora of different areas. How are you going to prioritize? But I think the prioritization comes from the group, doesn't it, of
yes, it
people
does.
you're focused on. And actually, it's the lives that you want to prioritize, and then from that, the relate sorts out what you then need to start focusing on in terms of the what. It's the who that
Yeah,
really drives this, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and also, to give it efficacy within a government setting, if you like,
Mhm.
or even an academic setting. We evidence this, and it's important that we evidence it using the concept of social return on investment,
Mhm.
because that then brings a legitimacy to it. Because this is not just about doing good things for people who require support; it's about doing it in a
Yeah.
way that demonstrates a social and a social economic, or social financial and cultural impact
Yep.
on society. An example of some of the things that we're doing just now across the UK, we can see ratios of 1 to 10 payback in places in the northeast of England, 1 to 44 in Glasgow, and 1 to 24 in other areas of the UK. And what we're effectively saying is we're able to demonstrate to local authorities and central government is, for each pound that you invest in support in these specific areas of need, we're generating £10, £44, or £24 of social return on investment back. So there are areas in the northeast of England that are getting £10 million of social impact, and that
Mm.
that social impact comes out across waiting lists, addiction services, homelessness services, statutory services. It's the alleviation of pressure
Yeah.
on these areas that you can directly map.
Mm.
So this is a different concept of value for money now. This is social value for money, which
Mm.
is where I believe our fiscal challenges as a country lead us to focus more of our attention, and we'll
Yeah.
see more of a societal impact.
And if you were I mean, I was about to say, if you were a finance person, I am a finance person. I'm an accountant by trade. Um, but if you were looking at this through the lens of, right, I need to get a better profit and loss for Britain over the next 10 years. How am I going to do that? How am I going to go out to the debt markets and say, yep, we're on track here, a structural improvement in our performance for the long term? You'd be doing this. And you'd be
Yes,
proving it through that social return on investment, because you'd be saying, look, we know it's this 20%, setting aside how transformative it is for lives, setting that aside, as important it is, if you were just saying, right, what do the numbers tell me in terms of where I need to focus? Here's where you'd focus. And actually, I think it makes the case that we'd always make to employers, this is a win-win.
yes,
Actually, through putting in place a sustainable approach, you are able to transform lives for the better. So it's not like we're actually pushing down a route here that somehow is a nice fluffy route. People sort of have a life transformed, and that costs a bit of money, but actually that's the good thing to do. Of course, it's the right thing to do. This is an essential thing to do if we are going to have stronger public finances for all of us to invest in the public services that we all rely on. And so it's shift what Wise Group is a big part of helping us do is shift out of that vicious cycle and switch it into a virtuous circle where actually people have better lives, they fulfill their potential. If things go wrong, actually they can get back on track. But in doing so, it's just better for everyone, isn't it? And that's why, in the end, this is in everyone's interest to see social mobility and lives on track really, really made progress on, actually, in this quite systemic, structural way.
absolutely. I mean, we talk a lot about the unintended consequence of previous policies is creating dependency
Hmm.
rather than legacy.
Hmm. Mm.
And the social return on investment concept is about creating legacy, because what you're
Yeah.
doing is you're getting more out than you're putting in, and you're
Hmm.
getting more out across a, a, a various elements of society. I mean, one practical example is that you mentioned justice earlier on in our chat about, and you talked about rehabilitation. When you look at, it's in excess of £40,000 per annum to to have someone in incarceration.
Mm.
The work that we do tends to involve, um, say, £2,500 to £3,000 per head per year. Now, one of the programs that we run in the national program in Scotland, the reoffending rate on the national programme we run is less than 10% of those who we work with within the first year of the programme. The national reoffending rate is up towards 40%. So if you just take those metrics and you take the £40,000 per annum and the £2,500 to £3,000 per annum, the sub 10% reoffending rate and the close to 40% reoffending rate, you don't need to be a mathematician to work out that there's a clear financial benefit to that. And that hasn't and you haven't then yet included the social benefits of remaining out of prison, the social benefits of the family unit being back together, the working on the potential substance abuse issues that you're feeling, getting safe and stable employment, having a safe and stable accommodation. All of these things you're able to work on constructively. And this is where social return on investment comes in, because you then start to see the apportioned benefit of sustainability. So therefore it's legacy rather than dependency.
And then alone the fact that there's fewer victims from you know, the impact of crime and that broader societal improvement. I think it's such a fundamental point, and in a way what I hope we can achieve with the commission is almost not to say to policymakers why you should do this, but in a way I think we should be challenging them to say you should be explaining why you wouldn't do this.
Yes.
Because actually it is so patently sensible. Why would you not move significantly towards this sort of an agenda? And I know that, you know, a lot of what you're doing is trying to reach out even beyond the WISE group and the people that you're working with. And I want to ask you about how you end up doing this role in a second. But if you are saying to people listening to this, and who maybe think this is fantastic, and maybe I won't be working at WISE Group, but I want to see what I can do to help. Whether you're someone at WISE Group or someone outside it, the stakeholders you work with, what is your ask of them, Sean, as part of all of this? What do you think?
Be open-minded. Be open-minded, and you know, again, another glib reality is, you know, if we keep doing the same things in the same way, we're going to keep seeing the same results. And I do think the pandemic did many things to our country. One of the things it did for us is it showed what we can do when we have to.
Yeah, I agree.
And my worry is that we are slowly losing the experience of what necessity made us do and how well we coped through necessity.
And the fact that people worked together brilliantly without any kind of manual, particularly, that someone had, they just had an overriding ambition of what they needed to do. And so people naturally played their role, didn't they?
Yeah, and it's, you know, as recent as yesterday, I was talking to our board about the difference between the burden of necessity and the burden of choice. And in most cases, the burden of choice is greater. And what we have now, whether it be with a changing government, a changing political landscape, whatever it may be, we collectively have the burden of choice. And my ask of the stakeholders is recognise that burden and make different choices than you've made before. Because the choices we've made before have led us to where we are. And we're consciously trying to change where we are. So let's make different choices for those who really need us to make those choices on their behalf.
And maybe it's obvious, but actually it's this sense of, if we want things to change, then we need to change too. It's not something that's going to be done to us. It's something that we need to be part of changing for ourselves. And for me, I think that's really empowering, because actually what it means is we can all be part of the solution. This is not a burden, as you say. This is actually something that we get to decide whether it happens.
Yes.
Not necessarily even a government of the day. They're part of it. They can help lead it and drive it. But actually, this is something for all of us to take a view on. I think the final question I really wanted to ask, because it's inspiring listening to you talk. the Wise Group, I think, is an inspiring organization to come across, and it was an absolute privilege. They were, I mean, just genuinely incredible people. How do you end up in this role, Sean, yourself? I mean, it must be, it must be a real challenge to think I'm the person leading this, actually, because you've got probably one of the most amazing teams in Britain, haven't you? That someone could have the responsibility and privilege of heading up. How do you end up in that role?
It's yeah. Well, firstly, it is a privilege, and I say that with all genuineness, it is a privilege. I I thoroughly enjoy what we do. I have to say, I wish that the Wise Group didn't have to exist, but it does.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
one of the things that we talk about is, and very, very rarely you ever hear organisations say, our objective would always be that there was no need for us. We didn't
Yeah.
need to be here, but we do. I worked in the private sector all my life, and at one point in our life a few years ago, one of our children had a serious health issue, and during that time, we got I got a sense of what the sector that I now work in does. Uh, to my shame, I'd never really heard of the third sector, nor had I been involved in them. Um, and I was given the opportunity to put myself forward for this role. It's actually my work anniversary is 6 years this Thursday, so I've been with the Wise Group for 6 years this Thursday, and it's went in a flash. Um, and it's the most rewarding and challenging role I've ever undertaken. Rewarding from the perspective that you mentioned in terms of the satisfaction of helping and supporting people and families across the UK to reach some sense of sustainability and stability is incredibly rewarding, and it speaks to who you are as a human being, which is
Hmm.
not always the case in the work that you do. And more than that is about the ability to have conversations with people like yourself and others across the UK, and help bring to life in an emotionally intelligent but practical way the reality of situations that people are in.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that most often we don't necessarily achieve at national levels, the connection between the reality on the ground and the aspiration
Hmm.
centrally. And
Hmm.
what I see is doing now is doing more of that. So um, it was purely life circumstances and opportunity that conspired to give me the privilege of doing the role that I'm doing.
And doing it really brilliantly. I know we're going to have to finish now, unfortunately, but Sean, it's just, first of all, just a great chance to talk to you today. I've absolutely loved it. And so also privileged to be able to work with you on this commission. So looking forward to what's ahead on that. But I think most of all, it's just such a great organisation that you lead, and I think it's been brilliant for us all to hear a little bit more about what you do and what drives you. I think it's inspirational. So Sean Duffy, CEO of Wise Group, thank you very much.
Thank you.